Oral, the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
My question's for the Prime Minister. It's about farmers and their family. It's about democracy. It's about the rule of law. In 1998, this Parliament voted to give control of the wheat board to the farmers. They have a right to vote on changes to their board. The Prime Minister is ignoring the law and their rights by trying to destroy the wheat board without a proper, open and democratic vote amongst all producers, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister reverse his anti-democratic actions and permit a fair vote among producers on the future of our Canadian wheat board?
The Right Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the premise of the honourable member's question is that we are going to do something that is going to violate the law. Nothing could be further from the truth. What we are going to do, Mr. Speaker, in this party is defend the rights of Western Canadian farmers, something which that party has never stood for in its entire history.
Order. The Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
False bravado.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as one Conservative member of this House learned today, this Prime Minister just can't cope with anyone who disagrees with him, constructively or not. And that includes Canadian farmers, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister stop the gag orders on anyone on the wheat board who disagrees with him? Will he stop trying to cook the voters list? Will he allow farmers to vote who don't share his ideology? And will the Prime Minister uphold the rule of law, uphold democracy, and put this issue to a fair vote amongst all producers and not just those who agree with them?
The Right Honourable the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, years ago, the Liberal Party took away from Western Canadian farmers the right to market their own wheat. Then a leader of the Liberal Party came along, having monopolized that privilege, and said, "Why should we sell your wheat for you?" Well, we are going to make sure in this party that our farmers are never subject to that kind of arbitrary behaviour by a future Liberal government.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the fact is that this government doesn't give a darn for the farmers in the West. The farmers chose the wheat board in Quebec and elsewhere in the country. They have chosen the supply management system. The Prime Minister has chosen to impose his ideology against the welfare, at the expense of the welfare of our farmers. Why is the Prime Minister continuing to attack the agricultural community? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for those farmers who chose to act in the way they have, this government defends their decision. We have defended their decision here and internationally.
Western Canadian wheat farmers don't have supply management. They are looking for options, and this government is always going to respect their choices and make sure the choices are available to our farmers.
The Honourable Member for Westmount Ville-Marie. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative minority government is once again going against Quebec consensus. A week or so ago, a representative of Dawson College asked for a strengthening and reinforcement of the gun control registry. Yesterday it was reiterated, but the Prime Minister has said that he wants to analyze the situation and reduce accessibility to weapons. 4 weeks later, the Prime Minister, can he now inform the House what does he mean by controlling firearms? The Honourable the Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we want a system that is more effective and efficient than the previous one under the Liberal government. That's why we have looked at all the facts, and now we are in the process of consulting with the province of Quebec and ministers in other provinces as well to look at the process to ensure that we have an efficient, effective system that will prevent tragedies in the future. The member for Westmount Ville-Marie, Mr. Speaker, day after day, the minority government is turning a deaf ear. It has ignored the protests of people who are not in agreement with it. Jean Charest yesterday asked the Conservative government to reflect on the recent tragedies that have been due to firearms offences. Will the Prime Minister not represent all the people in this country? Will he stop weakening gun control? Will he respect the choice of Quebecers? The Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I said that we are in the process of strengthening and improving the whole process surrounding the firearms. It has not been acceptable in the past, and that is why we are speaking to the Quebec ministers. We want to reflect upon the comments that were made by the Premier of Quebec, Mr. Charest. We want to have a system that is efficient, effective, and which will protect all citizens. The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Mr. Speaker, the government committed in the speech from the throne and in the budget to put in place income support systems for older workers. The government said that it would proceed with a feasibility study on assistance measures for workers. Yesterday, the government brought in an aid plan that has no income support and which once again seems to be basing itself upon a feasibility study. How can this be explained? The government has done nothing. It has delivered nothing. All it's going to give older workers is some programs to find other jobs through training. The Prime Minister, I certainly cannot accept the premise of the leader of the Bloc Québécois. This government is working with the provinces. We have put in $100 million for older workers. This is a promise that was made in the budget. This is a promise that has been kept. We keep our promises. The problem with the Bloc is that they can never do anything at all in this area. The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Well, yesterday, I'm sure that the Prime Minister has done very little for the unemployed, and that is why his assistance plan has been rejected by everybody in Quebec, not just by the FTQ, but by the Employment Minister of Quebec, who this morning said that it's not very close to reality, the plan. How can you say that in this time where we have $13 billion surplus and when they are making gifts to big oil, they have very little for the unemployed, they have nothing for older workers? How can they explain this? The Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, we don't have the same information on this side of the House. It's quite different from the Bloc Québécois. Our information tells us that the government of Quebec wants to benefit from that program and wants to benefit from all the plans that we have for workers, to aid workers. That's what we hear. The Bloc Québécois will never be satisfied with anything that any government does because we are a government that respects the Constitution of Canada. The mission of the Bloc Québécois is to destroy this country. The Honourable Member for Roberval-Lac-Saint-Jean, the mission of this government is to take care of those citizens who are most vulnerable, and they have failed at that task. You have to be disconnected from reality to think that somebody who has worked 40 years in a sawmill at 59 years of age can find new training to find a new job on the labour market, as is proposed by this government's plan. Why do they do much for the oil companies, and yet for the little worker, for the ordinary worker, it's always impossible? The Honourable the Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, I can tell the Bloc Québécois that we have great confidence in our workers, in our older workers. It is so true, indeed, Mr. Speaker, that the Mouvement des Aînés du Québec today has said that it would support the plan for workers aged 55 and older, and all other plans for older workers. They want to participate in the economic life of Canada. Older workers want to do that. The member for Roberval-Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, this minister is disconnected from reality. I met with workers in Montmagny during the election campaign. People who worked 25, 30, 35 years and were told after all that, you're too old. How can the government justify the fact that it has these hundreds of millions of dollars for its buddies in the oil industry and it can do very little, if anything, for older workers and the unemployed? Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, once again, the Bloc Québécois likes to talk. It talks, it talks. The Bloc Québécois said at the time of the budget that they wanted a targeted program for workers in Quebec, and that's what we delivered. That's not what they're saying now. The Bloc is against anything that the government does, anything that will promote federalism, that will promote the respect for workers. The goal of the Bloc Québécois is to have a breakup of the country.
So Danforth, order
Prime Minister last week, well, he was quietly, just like the Liberals before him, slipping hundreds of millions of dollars into the pockets of the big oil and gas companies. The Prime Minister let it slip that just like the Liberals before him, he's going to break his promise on reducing pollution. Canadians know that with these so-called intensity-based targets, pollution doesn't go down, it goes up. So it turns out that the Prime Minister has actually produced what he likes to call a Made in Canada plan that was really conceived in Washington, a Washington-based approach to increase the pollution, make the air dirtier right here in Canada. Will he admit what he's doing?
The Right Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course I won't admit that. I would urge the honourable member, the leader of the NDP, to actually wait and see the government's proposals, to see that everything he just said is completely wrong and without foundation. The honourable member likes to talk about money slipping by him. As I recall, that's exactly what happened to the government's budget, but it was a good budget and we're proud of it.
The honourable member for Toronto, Danforth.
Thank you. So I see. Once again, the Prime Minister's solution to pollution is to say to us all and to Canadians, hold your breath. Well, we'll see what happens in that bill tomorrow. On a besoin d'une volonté politique.
We need political will here, Mr. Speaker. The government's bill is a measure that is a total waste of time and that will not reduce pollution. The Prime Minister knows this. We can take measures now. We must take measures now to reduce pollution, to combat climate change. Isn't there something that there is going to be done to help this by the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable the Prime Minister? This government has acted and is going to act to reduce pollution. In fact, it was the first plan that this government presented to reduce pollution for Canadians. The fact that the leader of the NDP denounces a bill before seeing the bill itself means that we can't believe his words. The honourable member for Madawaska-Restigouche. Mr. Speaker, we can expect that a minority government might be well placed to understand linguistic minorities, but it's not the case, it appears. After cancelling the Court Challenges program that so affects the language, Francophone language communities, does the minister not understand that it is at the level of communities that action is needed, and that goes through maintaining communities' rights? The Minister of International Cooperation, Mr. Speaker, it's very important to understand everything I said. If the honourable member had taken the time to read the transcript of what I said, he would have seen that I was referring to our government's plan to do a great deal to ensure the further flourishing of linguistic communities. Between 1993 and 2005, they cut, that government across the way when it was in power, cut $100 million from their budget. Order, please. The minister didn't meet with the mayors at the municipality of Francophone mayors in New Brunswick, nor with the Acadian mayors and their association. How can she say that she is going to do something if she is not going to ask for the maintenance of the Court Challenges program? That is what they were seeking. What is the minister for? She is supposed to be representing the linguistic minorities in this country, and they all say they want the Court Challenges program. The minister. This is what our government has done and what I've done myself in a few months. I have signed quite a number of agreements. Agreements to provide services of some $24 million. Agreements with the municipalities. Agreements in cooperation with my colleague to deal with immigration concerns, and that is what we have done. Order, please.
Order. I can hardly hear a word the minister saying. There is continual yelling. She has another 15 seconds. We'll have some order. The Honourable Minister.
The Honourable the Minister of Official Languages. Mr. Speaker, we've done a great deal, and thank you. I hadn't finished. Last week I announced there will be a grant of monies given to the Canadian Federation and also monies given to the member for Bourassa must be more careful. There's too much noise coming from there. The Honourable Member for Quebec.
Honourable Député.
I'm sorry. Member for Newmarket Aurora.
I don't care.
Speaker, the Minister of Environment drives a car with a bumper sticker on it that says, "A woman's place is in the House, the Senate, and the Oval Office." That's a great sentiment if we were all American, but it's too bad that she didn't advocate for rights and equality for Canadian women within her own cabinet. In fact, the 6 women in cabinet sat back and said and did nothing while equality was dropped as part of this government's mandate. On the anniversary of Persons Day, I asked the minister responsible, how does it feel to be the person who eliminated equality as a benchmark for Canadian women?
The Honourable the Minister of Canadian Heritage. Order.
Mr. Speaker, this government is a government that's made up of caucus members that understands that not all women have the equal opportunity, and therefore we will address that. This government did not cut, as the previous Liberal government did, the women's program budget 3 times in the last decade, and this government does not have a caucus that has boys' weekends to make up their policies.
The Honourable Member for Newmarket Aurora.
Shame on you. Mr. Speaker, I think that answer does not satisfy Canadian women. On a day that we should be celebrating progress in the area of women's rights, there's a black cloud over it because this government doesn't believe in women's equality and doesn't even want to hear their progressive voices. The CETA minister and the minister responsible for the status of women apparently share the views that minority rights don't deserve protection. Will the minister send a strong signal to Canadian women on this very important day and reverse her decision to cut equality from the mandate of the status of women?
The Honourable the Minister of Canadian Heritage. The Honourable the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, as I shared with you an experience this morning of honouring some very significant women, and in fact these women are with us today. But I would suggest that the member opposite, who had the opportunities as one time being recognized as the most powerful businesswomen in Canada, did very little about it, and consequently, when we look at her board of Magna, there is no female representation on that board.
Order the Honourable Member for Quebec City. Mr. Speaker, not only is the program announced yesterday not a real income support program for older workers, but inaudible. Does the government realize that a real income support program would not only help hundreds of workers who've had the misfortune of being laid off in a major centre where the program doesn't apply? The Honourable Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, I'm still trying to figure out what the Bloc's position is on the new initiative we announced yesterday, because yesterday the member for Sherbrooke, a member from the Bloc Québécois, said, and I quote, "This program is a gain for the forestry and textile industries, and it's a good program." Today, the Bloc Québécois is against the program. What's the Bloc's position, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Member for Compton-Stansted. Mr. Speaker, take, for example, the Cardinal Clothing Factory in Montreal, where hundreds of workers were laid off. They're good sewers, seamstresses that are 55 and over. Many of them are immigrants that only have a sketchy knowledge of French or English and limited education. What government is the government going to give to explain to those female workers that not only is the program inadequate, but in addition, they're not even entitled to it? The Honourable Industry Minister. Mr. Speaker, that's a misunderstanding of the program we announced yesterday, because it's quite straightforward. The only criteria, we were called upon to create a program for older workers in the regions, and that's what we did. There are two criteria. You have to be 55 or over and live in a region in difficulty. All the other criteria will be discussed in cooperation with the provinces, including Quebec. The government of Quebec will decide which communities are going to benefit from this program, Mr. Speaker. We believe in the provinces, unlike the Bloc Québécois, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Beauharnois-Salaberry. Mr. Speaker, the program announced yesterday will be of no use to truly help workers. The Minister is under an illusion. When you're over 55 and you've spent most of your life in a textile plant, it's virtually impossible. The Minister of International Cooperation may listen to the workers, but she doesn't look behind, she only looks forward, and it doesn't change their reality. Does the Minister realize that losing your job after spending 40 years at the same company without a degree or diploma, all you have ahead of you is often the Honourable Minister of Industry? Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois keeps saying that people 55 and over can no longer contribute to Canadian society. That's not what the seniors movement in Quebec has said. They say that those people can participate in society, and I have confidence in those people, in those individuals, and I'm sure that people over 55 deserve to work, and they deserve our support. The Honourable Member for Haute-Gaspésie, La Métis-Matane-Matapédia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of the workers who've been laid off are in regions that depend on a single industry. For example, forestry, fisheries, and mines. Given that, retraining is difficult, if not impossible. Does the Minister of Resources, can the Minister tell people in the Gaspé who've recently lost their jobs how this program is going to help them retrain? And in what field, Minister? The Honourable Minister of Industry. What we're saying today to all senior workers, including those from the Gaspé, is that we've set up a program in cooperation with the province of Quebec. We're going to respect the priorities of Quebec. They'll decide which communities are going to benefit from the program, Mr. Speaker.
Buena Vista, Gander, Grand Falls, Windsor.
Mr. Speaker, when the Minister of Fisheries was the fisheries critic, He said in this House, quote, "The department has been asked to find up to $20 million. This means devastating cuts," he said. "Government cannot giveth and then taketh away," he said. Well, the departmental estimates now prove he is cutting $100 million, affecting 200 jobs in fisheries. Why won't the minister use this money to give instead of taking away?
The Honourable, the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Order. Order.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member should know, does know that he shouldn't be reading NDP published press releases, because what he's talking about are interim figures that are tabled that have no reality to the budget that will be presented next spring. Our budget will not be cut, Mr. Speaker. We're in the process of helping people, not hurting them. They had enough of that in years past.
The Honourable Member for Bonavista, Gander, Grand Falls, Windsor.
Mr. Speaker, there is a fish off the Atlantic coast called the flounder. Now, it's kind of a flat fish, you see, and when it swims, and when it sees trouble, it flips, it flops, and it swims in the opposite direction. So, with that being said, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Order. The Honourable Member has the floor. We will hear the Honourable Member's question at once.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Flip, Flop, and Flounder. Now, departmental cuts, also custodial management. When is he going to practice what he started to do? The
Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Order.
Mr. Speaker, I asked the member who should know, who ducked away from supporting our committee, to go to Newfoundland so that we could hear what the people had to say, so that we made the proper decisions in relation to the fishery. The biggest problem we have in Newfoundland, Mr. Speaker, we have an oversupply of one fish. It's called the shrimp.
The Honourable Member for Labrador. Order. The Honourable Member for Labrador.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Order. Order. We're on to the next question. The Honourable Member for Labrador has the floor. We'll have a little order.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's a bit of a whale of a tale, but look, there was shock among Canada's Aboriginal peoples when the Prime Minister announced that he would eliminate race-based fisheries. It's a page of the reform book. It's inflammatory and divisive. Yesterday, the Fisheries Minister was confronted by a fellow MP for his government's handling of the West Coast fishery. Having crushed Paul McCartney's relationship, is he now set on crushing Canada's relationship with Aboriginal peoples? Will the Fisheries Minister commit to protecting Aboriginal fishing rights, constitutional rights that have been upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada?
Yeah. The Honourable, the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'll gladly answer that, and I'll ask my colleague from Newfoundland and Labrador if he would talk to his friends in the Aboriginal families across the country, including the chiefs of many of the groups across this great country, and ask them what they think of the performance of this minister and the work we're doing with them to make sure that they have a part as we move forward in the fisheries of this country.
Honourable Member for Labrador.
That's his job, so maybe mine later. Confronted with anger over the PM's assault on Aboriginal fisheries, the Minister of Indian Affairs says, "Don't worry." The Fisheries Minister, too, has tried to soften his leader's vicious and unwarranted attack. The Conservative Party policy on Aboriginal fisheries depends on who you ask. The Prime Minister, the Minister of Indian Affairs, the Minister of Fisheries, the member for Delta Richmond East. Let's get some clarity here. Does the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans share the Prime Minister's opinion on race-based fisheries?
Look what the Honourable, the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Mr. Speaker, there is one person responsible for fisheries in this country, and that's the Minister of Fisheries. Our policies are clear-cut. There is one way to move ahead in this country, Mr. Speaker. You take all the players that are involved and you bring them around the table, and you make sure that you agree to a process that suits everybody. That's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister, myself and everybody else are in the one boat on this.
The Honourable Member for Burlington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Transport, Infrastructure and Communities with regards to the Toronto Port Authority. Can the Minister inform this House on the status of the review by Mr. Roger Tassé that this new government has commissioned?
Honourable the Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report to this House and all the members that on October 16th, Mr. Tassé submitted his report on the findings of the Toronto Port Authority. And on behalf of the government, I would like to thank Mr. Tassé for his extensive work in preparing this report. I will be reviewing the report, and on completion of this review, I will be in a position to comment more fully. Mr. Speaker, I can assure all Canadians that this government is open, accountable and transparent, and will therefore make this report public once I have reviewed the findings thoroughly.
The Honourable Deputy.
The Honourable Member for Acadie Bathurst. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unemployed workers have marched from Montreal to Ottawa to condemn the EI program and Conservative inaction. After years of Liberal and Conservative government, the situation's worse than ever. At the expense of workers, the government has racked up surpluses, yet 68% of women and 62% of men who've paid into EI still don't qualify for benefits. Is the Minister going to listen to workers and the unemployed and make the overdue changes to the program and reduce the number of hours to qualify? The Honourable Minister of Social Development.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for all the work that he's done on this issue. As he knows, employment insurance is extremely broad, extremely complex, and any changes that are to be made, we have to make sure that they don't affect some other part of the EI in an adverse way. And that's why we're slowly going through and making sure we take pay due attention to all the various aspects of the EI so that it meets the needs of all Canadians.
Very responsible. The
Honourable Member for Acadie Bathurst. Mr. Speaker, this government always has an excuse for its lack of commitment toward the unemployed and workers. Liberals and Conservatives for 12 years have served up the same unacceptable excuses. Over 800,000 workers don't qualify for EI. 1.4 million children live in poverty. A more fair and accessible EI program would help solve this situation. Yesterday, the Minister presented a program that will in no way help older workers. Enough kidding around. Enough's enough. What's the Minister going to do to help the unemployed and workers in the country? The Honourable Minister of Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, that's exactly why we launched our program yesterday, because we do care. We recognize the needs of older workers who have been displaced through circumstances beyond their own control. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to quote the president of the CPQ yesterday, who said about our new program, entre recevoir un poisson et...
Between getting a fish and learning to fish, the choice is clear. The best option for unemployed workers is to retrain as quickly as possible.
Right off older workers, we're going to help them.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Mr. Speaker, in Atlantic Canada, alarm bells are ringing over the government's waffling on the Atlantic Accords. Back when he needed votes in Atlantic Canada, the Prime Minister said in writing that no province would lose out due to changes in equalisation. But now suddenly, he's not so sure, and neither is anybody else.
That was before the election.
Will the Prime Minister stand up today in this House and admit that his signature is worthless?
The Honourable the Minister of Finance.
Unlike the government before us, we keep our commitments, Mr. Speaker. We're keeping our commitment with respect to the Atlantic Accord. We're also following the process that was outlined in the budget papers in 2006. That is, we're consulting with the provinces. The finance ministers have met We've received and we're reviewing and studying the various reports that have been presented. These discussions continue. We expect them to continue through the end of this year and into the new year, and look forward to Budget 2007.
Honourable Member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Mr. Speaker, this is just the latest in a long line of policy reversals by the government. The Prime Minister of Canada gave his word. If that can't be honoured, what can? The government recently re-announced the Liberal Pacific Gateway Plan. They even used the same minister we did. Well, Atlantic Canada is also a gateway to the world's richest markets. Atlantic Canadians know what the Prime Minister thinks of them. But are there any Atlantic Conservatives MPs who will stand up for the Atlantic Gateway, or are they afraid of getting the same treatment as the member from Halton?
Oh! The Minister. Order. The Minister of Transport. Order.
Mr. Speaker, the member of the opposition is absolutely right in underlying the tremendous work that was undertaken by my colleague in announcing last week with the Prime Minister and the Premier of the province of British Columbia the gateway and the corridors. We are also committed, Mr. Speaker, to the other initiatives in this country. As a matter of fact, we've already initiated some funding so that we can see this program and we can see this project go forward.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, last week, by having a staff leak confidential documents concerning Ottawa's signed light rail contract, the Treasury Board President inserted himself in a municipal election. Now he has his sights set on Toronto's waterfront revitalization project and a TTC contract. How many more municipalities across this country will this minority government blackmail and bully before it hands over previously committed infrastructure funding?
The President of the Treasury Board. Order, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government promised to change the way Ottawa worked. We promised more accountability. People right across this country felt the Liberal standard on accountability fell short, Mr. Speaker. I do note that the relationship between the Government of Canada and the City of Toronto is quite well. I'm working quite well with the Mayor of Toronto, David Miller, who just Monday said John Baird was a friend of Toronto.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the President of the Treasury Board, if he had read the Ottawa Citizen, would have seen in an article, and I quote, "People thought that this was purely political when they're speaking about his actions in Ottawa. The New Deal has become a raw deal, and the minister responsible for infrastructure can do nothing about it. Is this the new government policy? To breach confidentiality agreements, deny local democracy, use federal funding for blackmail, and interfere in municipal elections?"
The Honourable, the President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, I say to the member for Kitchener, she obviously isn't reading the same stories in the Ottawa Citizen that I'm reading. Here's what they said last week. The unprecedented scope of the investment makes a final ratifying endorsement by the new City Council entirely appropriate. Here's what the Ottawa Citizen headline this morning said. Majority backs Baird on light rail.
Order, the Honourable Member for Chambly-Bordua. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Instead of using the $13 billion surplus, of which $2 billion came from the EI fund, to truly overhaul EI, the government preferred to spend it all on the debt. How can the government justify that to the unemployed, who today are ending a long march to Parliament Hill, that the government prefers to use that money to give a generous gift to its oil company friends rather than to truly reform the EI system? The Honourable Minister of Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member knows that any surpluses in the EI account go to general revenue. Those are shared by all Canadians. The benefits of that go to help all Canadians, not just those unemployed, but to help create new jobs in this country. Mr. Speaker, that's important to keep our country going and growing.
The Honourable Member for Chambly-Bordua. Mr. Speaker, does the Minister know that that money belongs to workers and employers? The government's attitude is incomprehensible. They reduced the premium rate to help those that already are working, but did nothing to help those who really need help, the people the fund exists for, i.e. the unemployed. If the government is so short of ideas, is it at least willing to vote in favor of the two bills tabled by the Bloc Québécois, one to improve the EI plan, and the second to create an independent EI fund, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister of Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, we're, of course, reviewing as a new government every program in every department. But, Mr. Speaker, what we have to recognize here is that Canada has registered almost record low unemployment rates. 6.4% last month, Mr. Speaker. That's a miraculous achievement. We have to focus on getting more people prepared and skilled and into the workforce. That's what we have to do. That's what we're focusing on. That's why our new program that we announced yesterday, to help older workers participate in the workforce, not pension them off and have them sitting outside. Let's let them contribute. Let's get everybody back to work.
The Honourable Member for Outremont. Mr. Speaker, the questions for the Minister of Industry. Why is he trying to hide behind the government of Quebec when Minister Michel Fourchel stated that he was disappointed with the program because it didn't at all meet the expectations of workers? It penalized Montreal and Quebec City. Basically, this program is just a Band-Aid solution. Will the Minister admit that? The Honourable Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, the information my colleague from Outremont has and that from the government of Quebec is quite the contrary. The government of Quebec is saying that they're going to take advantage of the program, that it's a very good program for Quebec. But I'd like to say to my colleague from Outremont, what were the priorities of the previous government, Mr. Speaker? It had 77 priorities, but none of those 77 priorities had to do with older workers.
Mr. Speaker, it's reported that Chinese border guards fired on a group of about 70 unarmed Tibetans who were attempting to cross the border from China into Nepal. A 17-year-old nun was killed. The guards also reportedly took some Tibetans into custody, mostly children aged 6 to 8. Can the Minister of Foreign Affairs tell the House what representation has been made to the Chinese government and what measures are being taken to have these children returned to their families?
Honourable the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
I want to say that I share the honourable member's abhorrence and dismay for this terrible incident that happened at the border. Canada strongly condemns this act of violence against unarmed civilians as an egregious violation of human rights. We have formally raised these concerns about the incident. We will follow up further with the Chinese government and intend to reiterate Canada's strong condemnation of this gross human rights violation. We've called upon the Chinese to conduct a full independent investigation and punish those responsible, as well as release the detained Tibetan children immediately to their families and abide by the relevant international obligations, including those under the UN Convention of the Rights of Children.
The Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, today Charlotte Thibault, the Chair of Government Relations for FAFIA, was presented an award by our Governor-General to recognize her work promoting women's rights. The disgraceful irony is that she is honoured and the minister responsible for women has gutted the funding for Thibault's organization. The minister has changed the mandate so that women's organizations will be unable to continue to do their work. Will the minister stand up and defend women in this country and reverse her decision to change the funding mandate?
Honourable the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, nobody has to talk to me about minority rights. What we are trying to do as a government is to offer opportunities. And unlike the previous Liberal government, this government is taking action. In 9 short months, we are acting on matrimonial property rights for Aboriginal women. We have introduced universal child care benefit. We are going to put forward tougher justice legislation to protect our women. We will no longer treat the women who are victims of human trafficking as criminals. In fact, this is action, and this is what we will deliver to Canadians.
Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, it is obvious obvious by this minister's non-response that she does not understand her portfolio. By refusing new pay equity legislation and insisting that women have full equality in this country, this minister shows her total ignorance about the needs of women in Canada. She is unable or refuses to stand up for women at the cabinet table. I've asked for this before, and I'm going to ask again, Mr. Speaker, as the minister refuses to protect the mandate for the status of women, will she now do the right thing and resign?
Honourable the Minister of Canadian Heritage. Pathetic question is right.
Mr. Speaker, I stand up for women, but every member of this caucus and government stands up for women. I will not resign.
The Honourable Member for Malpeque.
Mr. Speaker, earlier in this House, the Prime Minister, as is his way, attempted to confuse Canadians on what the Canadian Wheat Board Act is about. The Act empowers farmers as opposed to them being at the mercy of the grain trade. Farmers under that Act have rights, and one of those rights is by vote to determine their marketing institutions' powers. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing, obey the law, and give them a vote on single-desk selling?
The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister has the floor.
Speaker, this government will do what farmers have always wanted, which is to have a range of marketing choices, including the Wheat Board. And I'll tell you, we're never going to be afraid to consult Western farmers, because the last time we did it, like so many times when we've done it in this country, they didn't return a single Liberal MP, and they never will.
The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton. Order.
My question is for the Minister of
Order.
Health. The Minister delivered a keynote address earlier this week to the Canadian Association of Pediatric Health Centres during the National Symposium on Pediatric Wait Times. Can the Minister please inform this House what steps Canada's new government has taken to address the important issue of wait times for children?
The Honourable the Minister of Health. Order.
Question. And curiously, while the previous Liberal government was doling out money to its friends, it forgot and it cut the funds in March 2005 for the Canadian Pediatric Surveillance System. But, Mr. Speaker, help is on the way. This government in Budget 2006 will provide funding of $400,000 per year for the next 5 years for this important program. Mr. Speaker, this will help our kids, it will help reduce wait times. We are on the side of our patients, and we are on the side of those most special patients, our kids.
Order. I would like to draw to the attention of honourable members. Sorry, question period's over. I'd like to draw to the attention of honourable members the presence in the gallery of the recipients of the Governor-General's Awards in commemoration of the person's case. They are as follows: Joyce Hancock, Maureen Kempson-Darks, Doreen Mackenzie-Sanders, Jan Reimer, Charlotte Thibault, Sema Shaw, the Youth Award recipient for 2006. The Honourable the Government House Leader is rising on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 66-2B, I would like to designate Thursday, October 19, 2006, for the purpose of concluding the debate on the motion to concur in the first report of the Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development.
Hear, hear. Did you want me? Order. À l'ordre. I'm now ready.
Order.
Point of order raised on